items, and item number 9 is the climate action targeted rate, the proposed governance framework. And as you'll recall, we made a decision in last month, in fact, at the governing body for a governance structure for monitoring and reviewing the implementation of the climate action targeted rate. So I will move the motion. If I can have a seconder for that.
Me, please, Councillor.
Councillor Richard Hill is seconded. And we have to talk to this, to lead this item is Anthony Cross, our Principal Transport Advisor. But I'd just like to say something briefly about Anthony. You're leaving us at the end of this week, I understand, Anthony, after 40 years of public transport and local government service. That's a remarkable track record. You look far too young to be retiring at this point, notwithstanding the grey on the beard. But I know that you've been involved with some hugely important issues, including the putting in place of the new bus network, which was done very successfully. So on behalf of all of the councillors online and other members of staff, can we thank you very much for the huge contribution that you've made, and wish you well for the future. And now you can't hear the acclamation, but the acclamation is happening there silently. But if I can pass it across to you, Anthony, with our best wishes, to lead off your last report to the governing body.
Mr. Mayor and councillors, thank you so very much. Yeah, it's been quite a journey, and it feels very, very strange to be at this point in my life. But the time has come to look for new things. So I really appreciate that that from you. So this report is really following on from the decision in June to adopt the climate action targeted rate, and as part of the resolution to adopt that rate, there was a proposal that a governance and oversight process would be established, and the purpose of this report really is to flesh that out in terms of what that governance group would look like in terms of membership and its purpose, the decisions it would make and the decisions that it wouldn't be responsible for. So those are largely set out in the first of the recommendations, and in more detail in paragraph 25 of the report. So that this would be a mechanism for ensuring that the purposes of the targeted rate, as was consulted on, would be met and carried out, and that any changes that would need to be made to the programs and projects included over the course of the 10 years of the rate could be overseen, and decisions made around which would be inevitable during the course of the rate. There will be some changes to the program, and that there's a mechanism for considering those changes, and also just overseeing the implementation of the projects and seeing that the purposes of the rate are being satisfied. So that's probably all I need to say. I'm certainly happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Anthony. And we also have online Jacques, Victor, and Robert Simpson and Lisa Bloss, if there are any aspects that need to be answered from their side. So we have the first question from Deputy Mayor Bill Cashmore. Bill.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor, and thanks, Anthony, and all the best for your future, my friend. Good luck, and thank you for your service. It's much appreciated. My question is a relatively simple one, and it's come from the Franklin local board, and it concerns development. As we know, in and around Pukekohe, it's doubling in size, going up, hopefully no more than out, into areas where there's no productive soils. But some of the developers are saying we wanted, instead of doing green parks, the local board is keen to put up mini forestry blocks, which obviously comes with an advantage of not incurring OPEX for mowing and so forth. It's an alternative to the green spaces. Is there a way that some of this can be incorporated into the urban mahere and that sort of things as part of the work on the climate change and the targeted rate?
I can answer very, very briefly. Okay. We had a very useful conversation with the urban Ngāhere people at council yesterday, and they're certainly incredibly enthusiastic about how they might use the funding from the targeted rate. But I guess the main constraint is going to be that it is a relatively small part of the targeted rate, and most of it is allocated towards street planting. But tiny forests and so forth are certainly something that they're thinking about, and very interested too in terms of maybe co-funding from local boards or other means to establish some of those initiatives.
Yeah, I think the envisage was, excuse me, that these were going to be 100% funded by the developers, but that's yet to be confirmed. Thank you, Jacques. You have something to add?
No. Anthony was correct. Remember that the main focus of the urban area funding through the targeted rate was to increase canopy cover, especially in the south, or those board areas that have very low canopy cover. But there certainly is that component of the tiny forests, and if there's some partnership that can be arranged with others, I'm sure that one can look into it. But the bulk is around street tree planting in
the local
from outside the governing body on it, which is not to say that the advisory panel, can't raise questions with individual councillors that can then be raised in that context. So it wouldn't be on this body, but they would still have access to raise their concerns with councillors and do their normal things with public input to the, well, actually, I don't think the advisory bodies can do public input to the panel, but they can certainly approach through their liaison councillor other councillors in the governing body.
Cool, thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Next question, Councillor Chris Darby.
Thank you, Mayor. And just look at the top, I also want to acknowledge Anthony's work for us, Mayor. A lot of people wouldn't recall that Anthony is the architect of the new bus network, along with others. But, every week, millions of Aucklanders travel across your new bus network, Anthony. That was a very difficult body of work. You were under-resourced at the outset, but we got you there collaborating with you, but you were the lead. So just want to acknowledge, Mayor, a significant body of work which this man before us now is ultimately responsible for. Thanks, Anthony. Mayor, just on the D, and for Jacques or others, or for Anthony actually, should we be agreeing that not just the Sustainability Office and our own Transport Strategy Unit, which Anthony's part of, should be part of the mix, but also Auckland Transport? Is there value in that? Can I just get some feedback on that from either Anthony or Jacques?
Sure, I can answer that, Councillor Darby. The D really is just about the, let's say, the administrative support to the governance group. Of course, Auckland Transport and both the Urban Ngāhere staff will be part of reporting. I mean, they'll do the bulk of that engagement with the group. So the CSO and the transport strategy is really the support to the group. But that's not the limit of who will engage with the group.
Okay, look, I'm satisfied with that, Mayor. We've got Auckland, as long as we've got Auckland Transport at another table contributing, and I'm being told that's the case. Thanks, Jacques. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. And I'm just noting in the background, Anthony, you've got it's an old rail car or something like that. That must have been very early in your term of service in public transport. Right, next question is Councillor Chris Fletcher. Chris. You might have your mic off, Chris. No, we're not hearing anything, Chris. I don't know whether you're having internet problems there. Nothing. Okay, I might. Okay, just while we're waiting to see if Councillor Fletcher can come back in with us, I've got a question from Councillor John.
Thank you, Worship.
Sorry,
I'm having connectivity issues.
Okay, back to you,
Can
Chris.
you hear me?
I can hear you loud and clear now. Thank you. Having said that, I can't hear you anymore. We'll just pause for a second. I presume you're still trying to be heard.
Fletcher or for Watson?
This is for Councillor Fletcher. Yeah, Councillor Fletcher, if you're there, you've got the first question.
Your Worship, it's Chris Fletcher. Can you hear me?
I can hear you now, yes, but we lost you again before. Oh dear.
If you can hear me, I'll log off and try and re-enter.
No, I can hear you. If you can hear me now, I can hear and see you. So do you want to try your question now?
Okay, thank you. My question really relates to how this will be used. Now, you know, if the oversight group are there, this is not for any operational purpose. This is just more about decision making. But you know, what are the types of decisions? Because I think we are going into an election period, and it would be good to think that this is something that all councillors can be involved in. Could you outline for me as officers the types of situations that could emerge? Because, you know, like a lot of us, I was surprised suddenly that we took a deferral.
We seem to have lost you again, Chris. But we had...
Your Worship, I'm so sorry with this connectivity. I'm actually using council data, and just nothing is working at the moment.
Okay, we can hear you again now. If you
good,
that's
question. Great. And also, while you can hear me, I also want to acknowledge Anthony for the work. I enjoyed working with him when I was on the board of Auckland Transport. So congratulations on all that work, Anthony, and best wishes for the future. But
okay, we've lost you again, Councillor. But I think
lost you again.
Yeah, but we have got your question, so I'm just going to go.
If officers can anticipate. Have you got the gist of the question?
Yep, yeah, we got the question, Chris. So we might quit while we're ahead and just get an answer to that.
Been able to convey any of my question?
Yeah, no, we got the first and the critical part of the question. So Jacques, were you answering that, or was that Anthony?
It was me, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Yeah, it's me. Thank you, Councillor Fletcher. I think we've got the gist of your question. So yes, what kind of decisions would we envisage this reference group making? Well, before we get to that, we envisage it having a very strong oversight and monitoring role. So we know that there's obviously heightened interest in the targeted rate, and so this group has been set up to provide that democratic oversight over it. But in terms of actual decision making, you know, this is a 10-year program. It is likely that over the course of that 10 years, things will change, and there will need to be changes to some of the detail of the proposals that we set before you towards the end of the last year in our various engagement with you. So if I can cite one, so ultimately it will be up to the reference group to decide, you know, what types of things it wants brought to it. But certainly an example that springs to mind is around bus services. The proposal for the targeted rate was reasonably detailed in terms of what bus routes and what bus services improvements will be funded from this. However, many of those, and we don't necessarily envisage changes to that, but over the course of 10 years, changes may be required, particularly when you consider that many of those services are dependent or have complex relationships with other services that will be funded via the LTP and are set out in the RLTP. So if there's changes in either of those documents, then that might have flow-on impacts for some of the services that are to be funded by the targeted rate. So if there are flow-on impacts and if there are changes that are needed, then we envisage that this group would be the group that provides direction on and makes decisions on in respect of those changes. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, it's probably also worth noting one of the responsibilities of this oversight group is to report to the governing body on a regular basis. Yeah.
Yeah. So hopefully, Chris, you were able to hear that that feedback from the answers. But this body will do the monitoring, but it will report back at least on an annual basis to the governing body. So other councillors will have the opportunity to raise concerns and raise questions, etc.
So you don't anticipate there will be matters that could be perceived to be controversial dealt with?
I think if there's aspects of significant controversy, then the monitoring group would take the opportunity to take those back to the governing body as a whole. It's we're not delegating a power of decision making to the committee. They are the monitoring group and they report back, and so any major issue would come back to the governing body. As I understand it, Jacques, can you confirm that?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's no decision-making responsibilities or delegation to this group. It is really just that strategic direction and dealing with those changes if they come through. But you're right, if there's anything of substance, clearly the group will have to come back to the governing body, and the governing body as a whole will make those decisions.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next question is Councillor John Watson.
Yeah, thanks, Mr. Mayor, and I just echo Councillor Fletcher's sentiments in respect of Anthony's contribution. Thank you very much, Anthony, for all the help you've given us in the Albany ward over many years. We really appreciate it. As far as this resolution goes, I just want to check, and I noticed the reference in point 4 there, A4, to meeting biannually. I'm really keen to know what that means for the duration of this term. So we're, essentially going into an election season now, where there's obviously a, degree of uncertainty. So I'm assuming that there will be no real actioning of this group prior to the new administration coming in, whomsoever they might be, and in respect even of that new administration, in terms of the program, and I think it has been alluded to in the commentary earlier, we were very precise in respect of what was proposed by this targeted rate, particularly as it goes to the bus routes. I mean, very, very precise. When I look at my ward, there's specific routes that are identified all over the place. So I'm assuming it, in the first instance, as far as the bus component goes of it, that work has essentially been done, and there'd have to be very good reason for from changing that, given that that was out in the public domain in the first instance. So I just seeking clarification on that in terms of the detail of the bus program, and the earlier point, Mr. Mayor, going to the balance of this term, which I assume that that there'll be nothing of any substance really occurring, and those biannual meetings will kick in with the new council in October.
Yeah, just to answer your first question, John, yeah, your assumption is right. It's too early for to be monitoring the progress. We've got barely 2 months left before the election, so I'm imagining that the first meeting of the monitoring group would be in the early part of next year, say when the program's had a chance to have 6 months of progress towards implementation. But for the second question, I don't know whether that's one to Anthony or to Robert or to Jacques. That's about your bus routes.
I will answer that one, and Unfortunately, Mr. Mayor, I'm slightly going to contradict you now.
Oh, okay. No,
And then you can tell me otherwise.
Yeah.
In the report, you will see, I forget the paragraph number now, but in the report, you will see that we are suggesting that there is actually a first meeting of this group before the election, and we are suggesting probably this month, maybe early September. And that really is just to confirm the first year of the program. So it's helpful to Auckland Transport and to the Urban Forest staff and to the AT board, just that that actual program is confirmed. And it may be that there are ever such small changes that may need to be looked at. I'm not suggesting there are, but I'm just thinking, inflation has gone up, all kinds of things have happened. And so the group just needs to make sure that the program for the first year, as it was set out in the targeted rate, that is all good and confirm that so that everybody can get on with implementation. There are also small aspects of the rate that wasn't detailed to the same level as the bus routes. Councillor Watson is absolutely correct. Those bus routes and their rollout, that was all set out in the targeted rate. But there are also small little bits of money related to information and marketing, letting people know about these new routes, etc. And that wasn't scoped in any detail. So that might be something that the group would want to have a bit of a look at. Just how do we apply that? What does that look like? But essentially, the first meeting to confirm the actual program for the first year.
Thank you.
So,
I've now read thoroughly para 44. My apologies, but that's simply to scope. I mean, it's not monitoring what's happened, but looking forward to what the program's going to do. Yep. Sorry, back to you, John.
yeah, so just as a follow-up, and I heard the expression used, small changes. Sometimes people's view of what's small and what's not can differ. So in that process, then, what is the capability to then report back to the governing body within this very constrained time period then? Because that's obviously part of what we're approving here is not just this group, but the sense that this group then will be reporting progress back to the governing body. So this first stage is quite an important stage. How is the balance of the council then going to input in that as alluded to in A5?
There'll be two more governing body meetings, one in August and one in September. So if there is anything significant, and I appreciate your point, well, what's the definition of small or significant? But if there was anything that the monitoring group felt needed to be reported back, that would occur in either August or September. But maybe Jacques, you'd like to comment on that as to whether you think that there's I've got no idea what you're going to be reporting to us, but I don't know whether you have yet. But if you have, you could let us know now.
No, you're absolutely right. If there is any change, and honestly, I don't expect any change. It's much easier in the first year to get things right than it is in the years thereafter. But it just seems to us that it is appropriate that the council or this group, on behalf of the council, just confirms their program. I think you're right. If there is any change that needs to be made, highly unlikely. But if there is, then yes, of course, we can come back to the governing body on behalf of the group that's supporting staff. We can put a report together on what those changes are.
John, further questions?
No, that's okay. Thanks.
Thank you. Last question, Councillor Wayne Walker.
Sure. So I've got a question, the main thrust of which is, why are we having this group? So I'll just make a few points. So this is one of a series of targeted rates. We've got a water quality targeted rate, we've got an environment targeted rate, we've had a transport targeted rate, we've even got a regional fuel tax, which is actually a form of targeted revenue. We don't have any such group for any of these other groups, many of which are for their purpose far more targeted. The particular issue I raise, and it has been answered in previous questions that I've raised, is these bus routes and the like are really just an extension of business as usual on the part of Auckland Transport. In fact, they're so integrated into the overall program that it's actually quite difficult to separate them out. And I did ask questions around that at an earlier meeting where I tried to separate out the climate action targeted rate in terms of emissions, and nobody could give me a clear answer as to even what the separated emissions targeted were. So in terms of monitoring and management, it's incredibly fuzzy. Tree planting is essentially business as usual. We're just scoping it up. The electrification of the ferries is a little more focused, but essentially it forms part of a larger program on the part of Auckland Transport. So the question I ask is, why are we setting up another group looking at a very limited part of our actions on climate change? Because this is only a very, very small part of what the governing body and council has to do, and we don't even have any oversight group around that, let alone this. So why are we having this? What's going to be the cost of it? Is it actually going to add anything? Is it going to make the boat go faster? Or are we just creating something to have something? So that's my question. Thank you.
Okay, well, I'll answer the political part of that and invite officers to answer other parts of it. Why it's not business as usual is because without this targeted rate, there would be none of the things that we are adding because we've got the revenue to do so. So that's the difference. It's consistent with the rest of our program, absolutely. But we've talked for years, for example, about planting urban ngahere, but we've never had the funds to do it. We've talked about the desirability of electrifying the ferries, but we didn't have the money to do it. And likewise, with the extension of the bus routes, we didn't have the money to do it. One reason, the second question I think that I took from what you've just said, Councillor, is what's the cost of the monitoring group? Well, that's just done in the normal course of the work of those that are on it. So there isn't additional cost in that regard. The third thing, and just proffering a reason why we have a monitoring group here rather than with some of the others, with, for example, water quality targeted rate and with the environmental targeted rate, it is officials within the parent body of council that are implementing that process. With this targeted rate, it's largely Auckland Transport that will be implementing it as a council-controlled organisation, which, as set up by the original legislation, is at arm's length. So there's a good reason to have a monitoring group because it's being largely administered through a council-controlled organisation, a CCO. But Jacques or the team, anybody want to add anything further to that answer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No, I can't really. I think you've explained it. You've explained it all. It is the first targeted rate that is mostly not sitting within council, and I suppose just the interest that the public would have, given the topic, given the amount that we're talking about. Of course, it's much bigger than any of the other targeted rates. We're talking over $1 billion here. I think it's just that democratic oversight by the political leadership of the organisation is an important thing, and give people the comfort that the funding is used exactly in the way for which the targeted rate was struck. Of course, the decision to set up this group has already been made. That was made in June, so this really is just about fleshing out what that looks like.
Thank you very much, Jacques. I don't have any further questions, so we'll move now to comments. So can you please indicate in the sidebar if there's any comments? Councillor Richard Hills.
Kia ora, Chair. Thank you, Mayor. I just want to say that this is a great thing. As Jacques thankfully I was going to ask that question. We've already decided to set this body up. This is just the next process. I think it was fairly unanimous or close to that decision to set this body up. It will be reported back to the whole council, much like the natural environment targeted rate and the water quality targeted rate is, through workshops and public committees, so we can ask all the questions and ensure that everything is happening based on our decisions and our direction. The oversight group was requested by many local boards, many members of the public, and I think many councillors, just to ensure that, as staff have said, that we are keeping an eye on what's happening, because the last thing we want to do is this be business as usual. The last thing we want to do is this be funding stuff or programs that were already funded. And as the Mayor has rightly pointed out, we have put this rate in because we did not have the funding for the bus services we need, the electrifying our ferry fleet, the urban ngāhere, which, yes, we added quite a considerable amount in the climate initiatives in the 10-year budget, but nowhere near enough. So this is going to be the oversight group that can just check and challenge, ensure that when whoever's on that group notices issues or things come up, then I'm sure the group will ask for those issues to be brought to the whole committee for a say on. But as many have said, this is not a decision-making group. It is a group to check and challenge and to ensure Auckland Transport, who is the holder of many of these budgets, are doing what we want, I guess, and what the public want. And I think for ever and a day, we hear that, Auckland Transport isn't listening and we should have more political oversight of Auckland Transport, and on something that we have made a decision on so clearly, I think it's really important. So thanks for setting this up, but I wouldn't worry about any kind of decisions happening. I think this will help. This will be a benefit to the community and a benefit to all of us to ensure that we get that extra information that we all need on the significant budget. So thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. I've got no other indication of comments, so I'll take the vote on the voices. All those in favour of the recommendations, please say aye.
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 Aye. To the contrary, no.
I wish to record an abstention on this. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll declare it carried with an abstention from Councillor Chris Fletcher.